So there's that. What do we got going on here, Rebecca? This is what's going on over at the Hill Cumorah. Now, not the actual Hill Cumorah, the hill that isn't the Hill Cumorah, but got named the Hill Cumorah because that hill's somewhere else, obviously.
Oh my goodness. It's so confusing. And I tried to wrap my head around it, but most of you are familiar with the site that probably when all of us were growing up was the only Hill Cumorah, if you're as old as I am or close, right? Not, the second one or like a second shooter. There's a second hill. No, this is the Hill Cumorah where the pageant used to take place. I'm sure a lot of you probably even attended that before that was discontinued, but there has been a whole renovation project there at the Hill Cumorah for a number of years. Finally, finished up, and Elder Bednar is the one that was able to go there, and he is going to dedicate the refurbished Hill Cumorah site, right? So it says Elder David A. Bednar of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles dedicated the refurbished Hill Cumorah historic site in Palmyra, New York. And of course, this was done on Sunday, on Moroni Day, right? Of course, that's absolutely appropriate. And it says this is where Joseph Smith was visited in 1820s by an angel named Moroni and given the gold plates, which contained the record now known as the Book of Mormon. And I did a little informal poll. When you hear Hill Cumorah, what's the first thing that comes to your mind, Bill? Do you think great battles, or do you think found the plates?
That where the plates were found.
That's what you think. Yeah. And that's what it seemed to be kind of age related, but I always thought great battles, and maybe I just, was into the romance and the drama of all of that. But yeah. And we'll talk about how that's really not a thing anymore there at all. So in his dedicatory prayer, there were 500 people that attended, special guests, and then it was broadcast worldwide. And he dedicated the site as a place of holy remembrance, heavenly inspiration, heartfelt appreciation, and a place of seeking and learning and humble reverence. And there's a picture of Elder Bednar as he stands up and talks to everybody. And the article goes on to say, it's the story of Joseph Smith and how he retrieved the golden plates from the site. But the golden plates became the Book of Mormon-ish, right? Sort of, they did, yeah. And they testify of Jesus Christ. And the history, the thread that kind of puts it all together from the time that Moroni buries the plates to when Joseph retrieves them, and then the stories we know that are the Book of Mormon. So what I'm trying to point out from that is they pretty much leave out everything I was raised with, which was the final battle, the drama of it, and then Moroni burying the plates, right? They're just kind of picking up right there where Moroni buries the plates. And there's a reason for that, I think. And you can probably guess what that is, Bill. Any guesses why they're not going there?
Why they're not going where?
To the battles. Why is that no longer a part of Hill Cumorah like it was when I was growing up?
The reason I was not sure what you would ask, because I was going into my YouTube channel trying to find the old episodes that RFM and I had done on the Hill Cumorah and the second Hill Cumorah and the second Watson letter.
Yeah.
The church, up until a certain moment, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. By the way, when Joseph Smith and David Whitmer and Oliver Cowdery meet Moroni on the road as they're all in a carriage, and this old homeless guy is holding like a satchel over his back, and Joseph Smith says, "That's Moroni," that person tells Oliver Cowdery or David Whitmer, "I'm heading to Cumorah." So it's come straight out of the mouth of Moroni. But what you're pointing to is that up until a certain moment, there was always just one Hill Cumorah, the hill where the battles took place, the hill where also the plates were discovered. But in the modern moment, we all acknowledge there's nothing in that hill that is not the place where battles of millions took place. So the hill must be somewhere else. Hence, a second hill has been invented down in Central America, and that's the hill where the battles took place.
But even that, according to the church, and I'll show you some quotes later, that's not even really a thing. So there is, let's see, here we go. There's a monument that has been refurbished and is still there. And I was talking to my friend Rob Lauer, who was the director of the Hill Cumorah pageant for like 12 or 15 years. I can't remember. He was deeply immersed in all of that. And he was reminding me that there used to be, and I'm sure they're not there anymore, markers by this statue that said, this is the place of the battle. It talked about the battle. So it went from battle to burial to discovery. That was the trajectory there. And that part is all gone. And I never thought about that's probably why they don't have the Hill Cumorah pageant anymore.
Yeah, it is.
Because, the Hill Cumorah pageant, and I checked with my friend who was the director there, the whole last part of it. I've never gone. Have you gone, Bill? Is the huge battle. You've been there then. So you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a battle and it ends with the burial of the plates. That narrative, they have distanced themselves completely from that. All they want you to remember is that this is where Joseph Smith said that he, see, so what do they mention? What don't they mention? Again, they do not mention the battle. They do only talk about retrieving the plates. That other part of the narrative is completely gone. And one of the main reasons, I think, and this was actually brought up in several articles, not church articles, but other sources, as they talked about this dedication, is we're talking about, what does it say on the church's website about Book of Mormon geography? Or what does it say about the Hill Cumorah itself? And this is what it says. It says the church does not take a position on the specific geographic locations of the Book of Mormon events in the ancient Americas. Speculation on the geography of the Book of Mormon may mislead instead of enlighten. Such a study can be distraction from its divine purpose.
They don't take a position anymore about where it took place.
Yep, anymore. Hence, the pageant's gone, the markers are gone. And they also say, while the church does not take a position on the specific geographic location of the Book of Mormon events in the ancient Americas, records kept by Joseph Smith and his contemporaries make it clear that this hill is the place where Joseph Smith met with Moroni and where Joseph received the plates. So the hard stop on that narrative with the battles and the burial, we don't know how the plates got there. Maybe Moroni wandered thousands and thousands of miles, like the movie The Oath. Remember that, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, RFM, I think it was his favorite movie. Or maybe they were teleported, transported. Nobody knows. But everything that Elder Bednar is rededicating right now is starting at the narrative where Joseph found the plates. And the last thing I just want to mention about that is let's talk about the trees. So this is what the Hill Cumorah looks like right now. And they said, let me get to my next page of notes here. Oops, back here. Sorry. It says in many photographs of the hill, we see a bare Hill Cumorah, but during Joseph's time, it was forested. Or was it forested? I mean, that's what I was trying to find out. And it probably needs more research, maybe even a whole episode of Mormonism Live. But I do know that the church has made an effort in the last couple of years to plant a whole bunch of trees. They had missionaries go out there, plant them from seeds, not saplings, so they'll be stronger, and reforest the entire hill, supposedly to go back to looking what it looked like when Joseph Smith would have been there. So what's interesting is that it was pretty bare, and I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute here, but back in 1928, a missionary and his wife were called there, and it was the Fighting Mormon. Do you know about this guy, Bill? There was a movie about, I think it was called The Fighting Preacher. I bet some of the people in the chat have heard of this, but he was a missionary couple, last name of Bean, William Bean, and he was a middleweight champion, and he was sent to the area to try to get to be friends with everybody. There was a lot of animosity about the church, as you can imagine, and the ultimate goal was to purchase the Hill Cumorah site because the church didn't own it. So I don't know if he went up to people and said, put them up, I'm going to knock your block off if you don't sell, but eventually he was able to get the sale to go through, and he arranged for all the trees to be put on Hill Cumorah, which is interesting. So the tree narrative from the church, I never thought I'd write the word tree narrative, but I did, is that in 1827, the church says it was forested and Joseph found the plates. Then treasure diggers, ne'er-do-wells, they tried to dig in the hill. They dug holes. The trees, just disappeared. Yes, Bill?
Every tree disappeared because the treasure diggers dug up the. I don't know.
That's one thing I read, that it was just people, they didn't take care of it. It just, the forest disappeared, basically, is what they're saying.
Forested.
So then we have in 1928, the Fighting Preacher, he reforests everything. Then the trees were cut down again for the infrastructure for the Hill Cumorah pageant, which started in 1935. You've got roads, outbuildings. I mean, it's a little city into itself, right? And then finally, in 2021, the trees are replanted to return everything to how it would have looked when Joseph Smith found the plates. But I don't know, because I did research and I reached out to some smart people. In Joseph Smith's era, the hill Cumorah was not densely forested. Accounts suggest the hill had some trees, some brush, some undergrowth. Early sources say it was partially wooded. There were some thickets. There might have been some scattered trees. Here's another little chart kind of showing the trajectory of the trees. I know everybody definitely tuned in tonight to hear about the trees, but my point is kind of be, much like everything else in the church, they may be restoring something that was never originally there, if that makes sense. It's kind of a metaphor. So I reached out to my friend Dan Vogel, because he knows everything. That's a shortcut. And he says, hi, Rebecca, see Cowdery, Oliver Cowdery's description, and it has the reference right there. The hill of which I have been speaking at the time mentioned presented a varied appearance. The north end rose suddenly from the plain, forming a promontory without timber, but covered with grass. So this is Oliver Cowdery, that it was pretty grassy and there were forest areas, but more on the sides. I mean, here are some pictures, from the late 1800s and the early 1900s. I feel like if I were standing kind of in town, I could look up there and see a bright glowing angel Moroni if I were looking up, right? If it really was that bare with the grass. So I just thought it was interesting. Here's, I think that was George Albert Smith dedicating the hill. Anyway, pretty dang bare, but now they are going to be reforesting everything to make it, they said, more of a sacred space. And my theory is that when you see it like that, it kind of looks, I don't know, like a curiosity, an oddity, kind of mystical, magical maybe. And they just want to move away from that and get to just the spiritual, kind of like the grove, right? They just want it to be very solemn, and wooded trees will do that. It will give you that feeling. So I guess my bottom line or question is, are they restoring something that never was to begin with? Kind of like a lot of things in the church. I don't know. Any thoughts on trees, Bill?
I'll just say that I didn't expect a false narrative about trees. I know there's a lot of false narratives out there when it comes to this religion and the stories it tells. But this one here, you can see the horse and buggy. So this is not like 1970. This isn't Holmes County, Ohio, where the Amish are running around. So that hill looks pretty bare. And it's all the pictures you showed, all the ones I've ever seen indicate a fairly bare hill. Now, this one shows a few trees there up on the left. And you showed a couple of photos with a few extra trees there on the left side. But for the most part, it looks relatively barren. Now, what this does, if you remember the story, Smith gets the plates, hides them in a tree nearby, then has to go back and get them, bring them back into the home. He's chased by strangers. He gets his maybe finger broken or whatnot. That doesn't make a lot of sense if this is what it looked like. He could have just grabbed the plates and headed on home.
Yeah, and I feel like everybody in town could be sitting there eating popcorn and going, oh, look, there's Joseph on. Oh, look, there's some kind of angel. Look at that. And again, I don't know for sure. Like Dan Vogel, he read that, gave me that quote from Oliver Cowdery, but I think maybe it was forested on one side, but I think it was pasture. So I'd like anybody to look into this, because it was a fun deep dive. It was pretty interesting to read the history of the area and the hill Cumorah.
I think you make a great point. If Joseph went to that hill and got the plates, everybody in town goes, he's coming back with the plates right now.
Get him. Well, that's the attack 3 times narrative, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, that explains why he did it in the cover of darkness with a black horse. So that explains that. All right. Well, there's another picture or two.
I just couldn't stop it with the pictures. It was so interesting.